son left me stranded at a bus stop with no money, no phone, just the sting of his words echoing in my ears. A kind stranger, leaning on a cane, whispered, "Act like my sister. My driver's coming. Your son will regret this." The afternoon sun glared down, relentless, as I watched Ethan's car vanish around the bend, tires screeching like a final insult. At 65, I never thought I'd be abandoned like this. My own son speeding off after a fight that tore open old wounds. If you've ever felt that kind of betrayal, the kind that makes your chest ache with disbelief, please subscribe to the channel and stay with me for more stories like mine. I promise you're not alone. My name is Evelyn Harper, and I've spent my life building things. Classrooms full of curious minds, a home with my late husband, a bond with my son I thought was unbreakable. I taught history for 35 years, weaving stories of revolutions and resilience into lessons for high schoolers. But that day, standing at a dusty bus stop in a suburban nowhere, I felt like a footnote in my own story. Ethan had insisted I tour a senior living facility, a place with sterile halls and scheduled bingo nights that screamed surrender. "I'm not helpless, Ethan," I'd said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I don't need you deciding my future." His reply cut deep. "Mom, you're being stubborn. You can't keep living alone like this." The argument escalated in his car, words flying like shrapnel. "You're not 40 anymore, Mom." "You need help," he snapped, pulling over abruptly. "If you're so capable, prove it. Get out and figure it out." I stepped onto the curb, defiant, only to realize my purse with my wallet, cards, everything, was still at home on the kitchen table. My phone, dead, its screen black as my mood. I stood there, humiliated, a retired teacher with no way to get back to my apartment 4 miles away. The weight of it pressed down. Widowed for 7 years, independent despite my creaky knees, now reduced to this by my only child. The bus stop was a flimsy metal bench, baking under the June sun. I sat, my mind racing. Walking wasn't an option. My arthritis would turn those miles into agony. Borrowing a phone felt like begging, and who would I even call? My book club friends were scattered, and Ethan was out of the question. I was still calculating when a voice broke through my haze. "Forgive me, but I couldn't help overhearing your situation." I turned to see a man, maybe in his late 60s, settling beside me. He wore a linen blazer, crisp despite the heat, and held a polished wooden cane. Dark sunglasses hid his eyes, and his silver hair gleamed under the sun. "I'm all right," I said, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. How much had he heard? He smiled faintly, tilting his head. "I may be blind, but I hear more than most." "Your son left you here without a way home. That's unkind." To put it mildly, his bluntness disarmed me. "Unkind is one word for it," I admitted. "Cruel might be another." He nodded, then lowered his voice. "Act like my sister. My driver's coming. Your son will regret this." I blinked, startled by the offer. I couldn't possibly— "Thomas Bennett," he interrupted, extending a hand with uncanny precision. "And you are?" "Evelyn Harper," I replied, shaking his hand. His grip was steady, warm. "Evelyn, I'm offering you a way out of this mess. No strings attached." His tone softened, almost teasing. "Unless you're uneasy about a blind man's help." I smiled despite myself. "Being blind doesn't make you helpless, Mr. Bennett. Just like being older doesn't make me helpless, no matter what Ethan thinks." He chuckled, a rich sound that eased the knot in my chest. "Well said, Miss Harper. We understand each other." Before I could respond, a sleek silver sedan pulled up. A driver, a man in his 50s with a professional air, stepped out. Right on time, Marcus, Thomas said, gripping his cane. We'll be taking Miss Harper home today. Marcus nodded, unfazed. Of course, sir. Ma'am, I hesitated. I'd spent decades being practical, cautious. Accepting rides from strangers wasn't me, but as my phone gave a final, useless beep, I made a choice that felt like leaping into the unknown. Thank you, I said, letting Marcus open the door. The car's interior was cool, smelling of leather and faint cedar. Where to, Miss Harper? Thomas asked as Marcus started the engine. I gave my address, a modest apartment complex in a quiet part of town, where I'd moved after selling our family home post David's death. Thomas considered for a moment. Actually, I hope you'll join me for coffee first. My home's nearby, and after today, you might need a moment to regroup. The sensible response was to decline. Instead, I pictured my empty apartment, Ethan's harsh words still ringing. Coffee sounds wonderful, I said. As we drove through tree-lined streets into an upscale neighborhood, I studied Thomas. His posture was confident, his movements precise despite the cane. If you're wondering whether you've made a reckless choice, he said suddenly, I assure you, Marcus is an excellent driver and I'm far too respectable to be a threat. I laughed. I was thinking you seem awfully composed for someone who can't see. One adapts, he replied, or one grows bitter. I chose adaptation. His home was a revelation, a sprawling Georgian-style house with ivy climbing its brick facade. A fountain bubbled in the driveway, and roses bloomed in perfect rows. Welcome to my modest residence, Thomas said, a hint of irony in his voice. I hope you like espresso. Inside the house was a blend of elegance and warmth. A grand foyer with a chandelier gave way to a cozy sitting room where Marcus led us. No adaptations for a blind man? I asked, noting the lack of tactile markers or simplified layouts. Thomas smiled. I've memorized this place over 12 years of blindness. Practicality is overrated when you know every corner by heart. Marcus brought a silver tray with espresso and biscotti, then left us. Thomas poured with startling accuracy, his hand steady. So, Evelyn Harper, retired history teacher, mother to a son who needs a lesson in respect. Tell me why he left you stranded. His directness caught me off guard, but I found myself opening up. I told him about Ethan's campaign to move me into a senior home, his unannounced tour of Crestwood Village that morning, the argument that exploded when I refused to be managed. He thinks I'm frail, I said, sipping the rich espresso. He left me there to prove I can't cope alone, but all it proved is how little he trusts me. Thomas nodded. Children often forget their parents are people, not obligations. My nephew, Julian, tried to take over my finances when I lost my sight. Thought I couldn't handle my own affairs. You clearly managed, I said, gesturing to the opulent room. He grinned. I built a logistics company from nothing. Blindness didn't erase that our talk flowed easily. History, books, the stubbornness of younger generations. Then a woman in her 40s entered, poised and polished in a tailored blazer. Uncle Thomas, Marcus said you had company. She paused, assessing me. I'm Claire Bennett, Thomas's niece. Evelyn Harper, I said, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes sharp with curiosity. Claire runs the Bennett Foundation, Thomas said. She's protective, as you'll notice. Claire's smile was polite but guarded. Uncle rarely brings guests home. How did you meet? Your uncle helped me out of a bind, I said, keeping it vague. I was stranded at a bus stop. Her expression softened slightly. That sounds like him. Always the rescuer. She checked her phone. I've got a board call in 20 minutes. Will you be at the gala tomorrow, Uncle? Wouldn't miss it. Thomas replied. After Claire left, he leaned closer. She thinks I need a keeper. Blindness makes her nervous, even after all these years I studied him. A question forming. His precision, his awareness, something felt off. She seems devoted, I said carefully. Protective, like Ethan, but kinder. Family, he said with a shrug. Now, shall we get you home before Ethan organizes a manhunt? Marcus drove us to my apartment as dusk settled. Thomas insisted on coming along, citing finishing the rescue properly. As we neared my building, he said casually, "There's a red SUV parked out front. Someone's leaning against it, pacing." I froze, staring at him. "That's Ethan's car." Thomas's hand found mine with eerie accuracy. "Indulge me in a small performance, Evelyn." "Let's give your son something to think about." "You want him to see me arrive in a fancy car with a distinguished stranger," I said, catching on. "Exactly." "A lesson in underestimating you." His smile was mischievous. I should have said no. It was petty, but Ethan's words still burned. "What's the plan?" "Simple," Thomas said. "Marcus opens your door with flair. You help me out, playing up my blindness a touch. I'll mention our plans for tomorrow's gala. Nothing false, just suggestive." As Marcus pulled up, Ethan turned, his face shifting from worry to confusion. Marcus opened my door with a formal "Miss Harper," and I stepped out, feeling Ethan's eyes on me. I turned to assist Thomas, who emerged with careful dignity, cane in hand. "Mom!" Ethan rushed over, relief warring with bewilderment. "I've been calling." "Your phone's dead. It was dead when you left me," I said calmly. "Ethan, meet Thomas Bennett." "Thomas, my son. A pleasure," Thomas said, extending his hand. "Evelyn's told me so much." Ethan shook it, clearly thrown. "I can't say the same." "We met today," I said, watching Ethan process Thomas's cane and glasses. "After I was left at a bus stop, Thomas offered a ride and invited me to his foundation's gala tomorrow." "Bennett Foundation?" Ethan said, eyes widening. "The logistics charity?" "The same," Thomas confirmed. "Evelyn's insights on education will be invaluable." Ethan's marketing brain was clearly recalculating. Luxury car, driver, foundation. "That's great, Mom. You're full of surprises." "Until tomorrow, Evelyn," Thomas said, raising my hand to his lips in a gallant gesture. As the car pulled away, Ethan stared after it. "Who is that guy?" "Someone who respects my independence," I said, heading inside. "Unlike some." Inside, Ethan followed, pacing my small living room. "I was worried, Mom." "I checked hospitals when you didn't answer. Oh, that must have been scary," I said, setting out tea. "Almost as scary as being left with nothing." He winced. "I shouldn't have done that. It was stupid. I worry about you alone here." "Then talk to me," I said firmly. "Don't dictate my life." He sank onto the couch, looking so like his father, it hurt. "I'm sorry, Mom. I was wrong." I patted his hand. "You were. But it led to an adventure. Maybe we both needed that." After he left, promising to listen more, I sat alone, replaying the day. One detail nagged. Thomas's comment about Ethan's red SUV. How had a blind man seen it? His precise movements, his unerring gestures, small cracks in his story. As I readied for bed, my phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. "Hope our performance shook him up. See you at the gala. Sleep well, TB." I stared at the screen, wondering who Thomas Bennett really was, and why I was so eager to find out. The next morning, I couldn't shake the puzzle of Thomas. While watering my geraniums, I dissected our encounter like a student analyzing a primary source. A blind man who noticed a red SUV from a moving car, poured espresso without spilling, lived in a house with no accessibility aids. conclusion seemed absurd. Was Thomas faking his blindness? At 1 p.m., a delivery arrived, an elegant box with a note in neat cursive. For tonight's gala. I hope it suits you. If not, no offense taken. TB. Inside was a forest green dress, my size, with a silk shawl and pearl earrings. The gesture was bold, almost presumptuous, but my fingers lingered on the fabric, soft as a memory. I hadn't worn anything this fine since David's company dinners years ago. My phone rang as I admired the dress. "Mom?" Ethan said, his voice cautious. I looked into Thomas Bennett. He's a big deal, net worth over $2 billion. Built a logistics empire before going blind 12 years ago. He's practically a ghost now. No public appearances. Why the research? I asked, slipping on the earrings. It's weird, Mom. A recluse like that taking you to a gala? Maybe he's lonely, I said, dodging. Kindness isn't always an agenda, Ethan. After hanging up, I did my own digging. Online, Thomas was a shadow. Old articles about his company, rare photos from his cited days, always in sharp suits beside CEOs and senators. Recent images were few, showing him with cane and glasses, always with Marcus or Claire. One blog mentioned rumors that his blindness wasn't total, citing unnamed sources who saw him react to visual cues. Nothing solid, but enough to fuel my suspicion. By evening, I was ready, the green dress fitting like it was made for me. I felt like a version of myself I'd forgotten, confident, alive. Marcus arrived at 6 p.m., apologetic that Thomas was tied up with gala preparations. He chose the dress himself, Marcus said, then hesitated. He has excellent taste, I mean. The slip piqued my interest, but I said nothing as we drove to the Bennett Foundation's venue, a sleek downtown art center. The gala was a spectacle. Crystal chandeliers, tables draped in white, a string quartet playing softly. Thomas waited in a private hallway, dashing in a tuxedo, his glasses lightly tinted. "Evelyn, you came," he said, taking my hand with that uncanny precision. "The dress is perfect." "You picked the color well," I said, testing. "Green suits my eyes, or so I'm told." His smile was enigmatic. I imagined it would. I decided to probe. "The pearls are lovely," I said, not touching them. His hand rose, hovering near my ear where the earrings gleamed. "Understated elegance suits you," he said, fingers close enough to feel their warmth. Marcus coughed discreetly. "Sir, Miss Claire needs you to greet the governor." "Duty beckons," Thomas sighed, offering his arm. "Shall we face the crowd, Evelyn?" As we mingled, I watched him closely. He navigated flawlessly, never bumping into anyone, reacting to gestures before they fully formed. Thomas, always a pleasure, a woman in a sapphire gown, called. "And your companion?" "Evelyn Harper, retired history teacher," Thomas said, elevating my title. "Her insights on educational outreach are invaluable." The woman beamed. "Wonderful to see new faces." "Thomas has been so reclusive, with reason," he said smoothly. "Crowds are tricky without sight." I leaned closer as we moved away. "You spotted the governor across the room earlier." He wasn't facing us. His step faltered slightly. "A figure of speech!" Marcus signals me Marcus was 20 feet away, engrossed in conversation. I let it slide as Claire approached. "Uncle, we're starting the speeches." "Evelyn, you're at our table." Her tone was warm but wary, her eyes flicking between us. Dinner was lavish, Thomas's speech flawless without notes. I noticed more inconsistencies. He identified a roasted quail on his plate without touching it, turned toward a clatter before it happened. After dessert, he led me to a quiet balcony overlooking the city. "You're observant tonight," he said, handing me a glass of wine. "What's on your mind?" I set down the glass. "You move too well for a blind man, Thomas." Noticing my earrings, reacting to things you shouldn't see. I taught history. I know a crafted narrative when I see one. He stiffened, then smiled faintly. Not here. Meet me by the fountain in 10 minutes. I nodded, heart racing. In the restroom, I checked my reflection, seeing a woman bolder than I'd ever been. The fountain was tucked in a courtyard, its water glinting under soft lights. Thomas stood there, glasses off, his eyes clear and sharp, locked on mine. 7 clues, he said. You caught 7 tonight. 8, I corrected. The earrings were the clincher. He gestured to a bench. Why fake it? I asked as we sat. 12 years ago, I was too visible, he began. My company revolutionized supply chain tech. I was in headlines, meeting world leaders. Then the threats started, not just to me, but Claire. Stalkers sent photos of her at college, hacked our systems. I needed to vanish. Blindness was your shield, I said, understanding. He nodded. A mild vision issue gave me the idea. People look away from the disabled. I became invisible while staying in plain sight. But it's a cage, I said. You're trapped in the lie. It was freedom at first, he admitted. Now it's heavy. Only Marcus and Claire know, and now you. Why tell me? Because you saw me, he said, voice raw. Not the billionaire, not the blind man. Me. Your honesty, your dignity. It's rare, Evelyn. His hand brushed mine, tentative. I want to be Thomas with you, no pretense. I like that, I said, heart pounding. Marcus interrupted, signaling Claire's approach. Thomas slipped on his glasses, the mask returning. Back at the gala, Claire's eyes narrowed. Evelyn, I hope Uncle hasn't overwhelmed you. It's been eye-opening, I said, catching Thomas's private smile. The next week was a whirlwind. Thomas called daily, our talks deep and unguarded. He invited me to dinner at his home, a cozy affair with candles and Italian wine. Claire walked in unannounced, freezing as she saw Thomas without glasses, his eyes on me. She knows, Claire whispered, fear in her voice. She figured it out, Thomas said calmly. Sit, Claire. Who else knows? She demanded, turning to me. No one, I said, and I won't tell. Why should I trust you? She snapped. Because she's shown more discretion than anyone I've met, Thomas said. She's not a threat, Claire. Claire sank into a chair. This could ruin us, the foundation, the company. I want what I found with Thomas, I said. Honesty, respect. That's enough, Claire softened, but warned. The longer you're around, the riskier this gets. Then we'll face it together, Thomas said, taking my hand. The air shifted, a new bond forming. Days later, Ethan visited, bearing donuts and suspicion. This Thomas thing, it's moving fast, Mom. I'm happy, I said simply. That's what matters. His phone buzzed. A call from his firm. The Bennett Foundation wants us to pitch their outreach campaign, he said, stunned. Did you... I mentioned your work, I admitted. The rest is up to you. That night, Thomas texted. Urgent. Journalist, digging into my blindness. Cars coming. TB. At his mansion, tension hung thick. Lydia Crane, investigative reporter, Thomas said, tossing a folder onto his desk. She's publishing next week. Thomas Bennett's questionable blindness. She's got photos, interviews, medical opinions. I skimmed the draft. Images of us at the gala, Thomas reacting to visual cues. It's suggestive, not definitive, I said. But it invites scrutiny, he replied. And you're in it, Evelyn. An unidentified companion. My heart sank. I'd become a weak point in his facade. Maybe we should step back, I said. Is that what you want? He asked, voice tight. No, I admitted. I want you. He took my face gently, kissing me with a tenderness that felt like a promise. "I'm falling for you, Evelyn Harper," he said, "complications and all." "I'm in too," I said, smiling, fraudulent blindness included. The article hit like a storm. Lydia Crane's piece, published in a major outlet, was brutal, hinting at fraud without direct proof. My blurry image at the gala fueled speculation. Claire called, frantic. "The board's panicking. Partners want answers." "I'm coming," I said, rushing to Thomas's mansion. Guards patrolled the gates, media swarming. Inside, advisors debated, deny, deflect, or claim partial recovery. Thomas silenced them. "Evelyn and I need to talk." Alone, he removed his glasses, eyes weary. "What would you do?" "Tell the truth," I said. "Not because you're caught, but because the lies cost you more than it's worth." He nodded. "I've been hiding from life." "You showed me that. Would you stand with me publicly?" he asked. "It'll mean scrutiny, exposure." "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The press conference was electric. Thomas faced the cameras without glasses, his gaze steady. "For 12 years, I've faked blindness to protect my privacy and my family. Today, I'm owning that choice and its consequences. I stood beside him, Claire at his other side, a united front. The fallout was chaotic. Headlines, debates, tabloid stories about me. But the foundation endured, its mission reframed around transparency. Ethan was stunned. "You're famous, Mom," he said at dinner. "People ask if you're with a fake blind billionaire." "And you say?" "That my mom's sharper than anyone and happier than I've seen her." 6 months later, the frenzy faded. Thomas and I split time between his mansion and my apartment, balancing his public truth with our private bond. On the anniversary of that bus stop, we returned. "A year ago, you were stranded," Thomas said. "And I was hiding." "And now?" I asked. "Now we're free." He pulled out a pearl ring. "Evelyn Harper, will you marry a reformed pretender who sees you clearly?" "Yes," I said, laughing as he slid the ring on. "But Ethan walks me down the aisle." As we sat at that bus stop, I thought of the journey from abandonment to this, a story of being seen, truly seen, in all my strength and flaws. "Your son will regret leaving you," Thomas had whispered that first day. He was right, in ways neither of us imagined. Sometimes the greatest transformations begin in the smallest places, like a sunlit bus stop where two souls dared to see each other. Please share your own stories of betrayal or unexpected connection in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And if this story moved you, subscribe to the channel to join me for more. You're not alone in this journey.